Well, we have completed another Dark Souls game, and that means it's time to find out exactly what happened in it. Since completing my own blind playthrough, I've gotten back to my lore diving, reading wikis, listening to podcasts, watching countless YouTube videos, all in an effort to get a handle on the general consensus understanding of Dark Souls 2's story. The hidden, loose mythology of these worlds are a huge part of the Souls series' appeal, so just like last time, I would like to look back over our journey through Dark Souls 2 and try to piece together everything that happened around us, digging into the central plot, the characters we met along the way, and the places we adventured through. Now before we get started, some important things to mention. Number 1, this video will be spoiler heavy. I mean, obviously. Number 2, if you are a Dark Souls veteran, you probably know everything I'm gonna say here and more. I know for a fact that many of you know this game far better than I, so apologies for everything I get wrong. Number 3, there's gonna be a bit of speculation stitching all of these stories together. It's kind of by necessity, even more so than in the first game, and it's entirely possible that some of you connect these story dots in different ways, which is totally okay. That's what makes this lore so fun. Number 4, I haven't played Dark Souls 3 yet, so it's possible that some of my theories are already out of date, and if that's the case, don't worry about correcting me. I'm gonna find out for myself soon, why spoil it? And number 5, once again, I want to stress that nothing I'm about to say in this video is some new revelation. Every lore observation you're about to hear from me is thanks to the work done by far more dedicated individuals across the internet who have already researched and compiled all of this information. Particular thanks go to VaatiVidya, EpicNameBro, DaveControl, TerraMantis, and the fantastic Bonfireside chat podcast, and the editors of all those countless wiki pages. You can find links to all of these in the description below, and I highly recommend checking them all out yourself if you haven't. I mean, there's no way I'm gonna cover even half of this game's story content in just this one video, so just rest assured that if you want more lore talk after I'm done here, there is plenty more out there for you to enjoy. Anyway, let's talk lore. I find that comparing the stories of Dark Souls and Dark Souls 2 is kinda similar to comparing the design of their respective worlds. Where Lordran was a compact, layered space, a highly interconnected map that folded over itself, DRANGLEIC is enormous and sprawling. It feels larger and more varied than the Lordran we explored, but maybe not quite so cohesive or focused. And so it is with their stories. Dark Souls 2 is an enormous collection of short stories scattered across a wide space. There's more characters, more places, tons of side stories branching off of the central plot, but without much connective tissue between them. Still, while some of those scattered stories may not come together in the same focused way the original game did, and while some of those side characters and short stories may not have all that interesting a payoff, there still is a lot of it, and a lot of it is still really cool. Now last time, I started with a big picture overview of the world's mythology, which felt right since that's how Dark Souls 1 starts. But I think Dark Souls 2 is going to require a somewhat different approach, so instead, let me just start with a story. A piece of the larger history which sets the stage for all of the events that follow. This is the story of DRANGLEIC. Our tale begins long after the events of Dark Souls, who knows how many centuries or millennia later. The cities, people, and stories of Lordran have been lost to time, and many great kingdoms have risen and fallen in its wake. It was upon the remains of these many fallen realms that VENDRICK built his own, DRANGLEIC. We don't know much about VENDRICK'S past, but his rise to power did mirror our own. He conquered 4 great ones and built his kingdom with their powerful souls. VENDRICK was a warrior, a leader of soldiers, one who valued martial strength above all. Through his strength, and with the aid of his brilliant elder brother ALDIA, DRANGLEIC grew and flourished. Legend has it that one day, a beautiful woman named NASHANDRA came to DRANGLEIC, and VENDRICK grew fond of her. She warned the king of a looming threat to his kingdom, of the giants who lived across the sea. They would bring war and destruction to his kingdom, she said, if he did not bring the war to them first. And so he did. Naming NASHANDRA his queen, VENDRICK crossed the sea and fought the giants, pillaging their land and bringing a number of them back to DRANGLEIC as captives, as prisoners for he and ALDIA to experiment on. These gruesome experiments granted VENDRICK a greater understanding of the nature of souls, and with this knowledge, he was able to infuse lifeless objects with souls, creating golems and automatons. He used his powerful golems to build DRANGLEIC Castle for NASHANDRA, and he ruled his kingdom with her at his side through many years of peaceful prosperity. But it wouldn't last. The giants, furious over the subjugation of their kingdom and the enslavement of their people, launched a counter-invasion of DRANGLEIC. They attacked in force, assaulting every fort and settlement they could find, laying siege to VENDRICK'S castle. This battle raged across DRANGLEIC for generations, until at last the giant's king was defeated and the war was won. But VENDRICK'S kingdom now lay in ruin. Many of its citizens had fled to escape the fighting. Much of DRANGLEIC had been reduced to rubble. Then came the curse. As in the time of Lordran, the first flame began to fade once more, and the undead curse spread anew throughout the weakened, crumbling kingdom. VENDRICK feared the curse. He and ALDIA desperately continued their research into the nature of the soul in hopes of finding some key to the curse's prevention. Many experiments were attempted, but their efforts yielded nothing. VENDRICK tried everything he could to keep the curse at bay and buy time. He tried using his great soul to slow the curse's spreading, began rounding up the undead and shipping them far away from his domain, but none of this stopped the slow spread of the curse. VENDRICK faced a familiar decision. As the Lord of the Realm, he could take his rightful place as monarch, use his soul to kindle the first flame, to stave off the dark. Or he could embrace the rise of the dark from that throne, let the flame die, usher in the Age of Dark. But VENDRICK would never take the throne. Suddenly and mysteriously, the king went into exile, along with a handful of his most loyal knights, and vanished. The once great kingdom of DRANGLEIC, now leaderless, slowly falls further and further into decay. Until one day, a lone undead wanderer named ELISA stands at the gates of this decaying realm without really knowing why. So begins our journey. We are an undead, branded with the mark of the cursed, a hollowing husk of our former self, with no recollection of the life we left behind, who we were, where we came from, the life we lost. Those memories have faded and deteriorated as our hollowed condition worsens. For all we know, perhaps we died already, maybe many times. Soon there will be nothing left of us. After wandering the world for who knows how long, we stumble upon an old woman in a shack who tells us of a forgotten, walled-off kingdom to the north called DRANGLEIC. In this place, she says, souls may mend our ailing mind. In desperate hope of finding some cure for our curse, we journey through a portal and find ourselves in a dimensional rift, a gateway between DRANGLEIC and the outside world, called Things Betwixt. In this mysterious limbo outside of time, we find a cabin full of old, retired firekeepers. It seems the world no longer needs these women to maintain the bonfires. We're not the first undead to journey here looking to break the curse, they tell us. They don't have much confidence in our chances, but they are nice enough to give us a human effigy, to help us stave off the effects of hollowing for a little while longer. Effigy in hand and purpose in mind, we press on toward DRANGLEIC and stumble into a tiny coastal village, Majula. This quiet little settlement has become a haven for the many undead travelers who journey to DRANGLEIC. Many of them eventually settle down to just live here, as the hollowing slowly consumes them. It's a place where life can almost seem normal for a while. But with no drive to give them purpose, their hollowing progresses, and as it does, they slowly forget what brought them here to begin with. The merchant Melentia has always lived in DRANGLEIC. The blacksmith Linegrast originally wandered here to find his gallivanting daughter. Kale can't even remember what brought him to DRANGLEIC, and the only remaining purpose he can recall is his passion for maps. Moglin came here to find fortune as a merchant. Lycia and Gilligan are just profiteering scoundrels. Carhillion came here to study magic, and Rosabeth followed him. Soldan, like most, came in hopes of curing his curse, only to become crestfallen and give up when he realized the daunting obstacles that stood in his way. And Shalquar? She's just a weird immortal cat. Don't worry about it. But most important among them, we meet the Emerald Herald.
Are you the next monarch, or merely a pawn of fate?
She gives us an Estus flask to ease our journey, and tells us that to find the answers we seek, we must see the king of this land, VENDRICK, he who made DRANGLEIC what it once was, he who peered at the essence of the soul. The only way we can hope to reach him, she says, is to seek souls, larger, more powerful souls. Seek misery and claim the 4 great souls of the Old Ones before this land swallows us whole, just like it has so many others. It's not a lot to go on, but it is something, a purpose to keep driving us forward and stave off hollowing. So we set off on our adventure, a journey that will span the entire breadth of DRANGLEIC. First, we travel through the Forest of Fallen Giants, a fortress which once bore the brunt of the Giants' assault on DRANGLEIC, a crumbled ruin now reclaimed by the surrounding forest. Its defenders long succumbed to the curse. We fend off a pursuer, as well as the last living giant remaining in the place, who flies into a murderous rage at the sight of us for some reason. Then we pass through Hyde's Tower of Flame, an ancient city built who knows when by who knows what civilization. It may even date back as far as the time of Lordran, judging by its similar architecture. The sea has all but taken it though, and only a few loyal knights linger to defend its sunken structures. Next, to a dark, isolated inlet on the northern coast, No Man's Wharf. Built by some past forgotten kingdom, repurposed by VENDRICK, this place became a prison port. Many of the cursed undead that VENDRICK could capture and round up would be brought here, packed into boats, and shipped far away from his kingdom, anywhere but at his doorstep. Some were simply dumped into the ocean. Others would be locked up and forever forgotten in the lost Bastille. We ring the bell, hail a ship, and make that journey ourselves. The Lost Bastille, too, was built before VENDRICK'S time, meant to imprison some other threat. Prisoner and jailer alike have succumbed to the curse now, but the most interesting of the Bastille's occupants waits in the heart of the Bastille, in Sinner's Rise, hidden from sight but unguarded. Inside we find the Lost Sinner, a criminal from an age long past who tried to light the first flame. We don't know the circumstances of her trespass, or why it merits such an extreme, prolonged punishment, but she still sits here in penance, in darkness, tormented by her bonds and a familiar-looking chaos insect. With the help of some fellow wanderers, we free the lost sinner from her tortured existence and claim her great soul. Our journey next takes us southward to the darkened forest of the Huntsman's Copse and into the realm once ruled by the Old Iron King. A proud, cruel monarch, the Old Iron King once conducted undead hunts in these woods, his own butcherous solution to the undead curse. Up in the undead purgatory, his executioner's chariot runs down undead prisoners again and again, tormenting the cursed wretches for eternity. But now, in this dark forest, hunter and prisoner are indistinguishable. The curse spares no one. Beyond the forest, we stumble into Harvest Valley, which lies at the foot of Earthen Peak. The poison from this toxic landscape is being slowly pumped up into the keep, hoarded by the baneful Queen Mitha to maintain her corrupted beauty. Past her and up the mountain beyond, we find the Iron Keep, the once great metal castle of the Old Iron King. This grand bit of architecture, this daunting fortress, an extension of the Iron King's incomparable ego, now sinks under its own weight into the lava of the mountain. Deep within the keep, we find the king himself, somehow transformed into an enormous demon. In defeating him, we obtain our second great soul. For the third, we must go underground. We drop down through the giant waste pit in Majula, the hole which so many past kingdoms used to dispose of their unwanted. The grave of saints is down here, perhaps once a holy resting place, but now the domain of rats. The Rat King tests us, then grants us passage to the gutter below. All the terrible, unwanted, and forgotten things that are cast into the pit gather here in this settlement of filth to scrape out some sort of miserable existence. And it only gets worse from there. Deeper still into the earth, we find ourselves in Black Gulch, and at the very bottom, through the fluorescent green caverns and past hundreds of strange, poison-spewing statues, we find the Rotten, a writhing patchwork amalgamation of dozens of lost, unwanted souls, quietly sobbing as it fails to assemble new statues. It flies into a rage at our intrusion, and we defeat it to obtain a third great soul. Only one remains. Heading east, we arrive in the Shaded Woods, a forest shrouded in fog. Wandering through the ruins of yet another unknown past kingdom, we find ourselves in the Doors of Pharos, a watery mountain passage inhabited by the dwarfish Gurm, and filled with traps and contraptions likely devised by Pharos, the mysterious vagabond. On the other side of this treacherous cavern, we find Brightstone Cove Seldora. This mining town, built long ago by a man named Seldora, has not only fallen prey to the curse, but been overrun by parasitic spiders. And in the mine below, we find the source, Freya. Once the dear pet of Seldora, this spider broke free of its cage and somehow took possession, or was possessed by, a great soul. It became monstrous, making its nest in the remains of an ancient dragon underground. We slay the monster, as well as the hollow of what was likely once Seldora himself, and the fourth great soul is ours. With the 4 required great souls finally in our possession, we prepare to return to Majula when we are explosively greeted by a strange being. A tangle of fire and chaos branches.
No one has come this far. Not for a very long while. Young Harlow, do you wish to shed this curse?
There are but 2 paths, the stranger informs us. Inherit the order of this world, or destroy it. Only a true monarch can make this choice. Like the Emerald Herald, it too urges us to seek Vendrick, he who almost became a true monarch, so that we might succeed where the King of DRANGLEIC failed. After all, as the stranger says,
only a true monarch can make such a choice.
With the 4 souls gathered, the Emerald Herald tells us to make our way to the castle. The way to Vendrick is finally open to us. Perched atop a mountain, near the center of his kingdom, DRANGLEIC Castle sits. This great structure, built by Vendrick's golems to honor his queen, is filled with golems still, as well as a handful of loyal knights and the ghost of Vendrick's royal chancellor. But we do not find Vendrick there. Instead, we encounter his queen, NASHANDRA. She compliments our persistence, and just as the herald and the fiery stranger did before, she urges us to continue our journey to find Vendrick.
He found the strength to rule his people, and when the undead were born, cursed, he found more strength to face them. But in the end, he never took the true throne. We have no need for 2 rulers.
We follow Vendrick's trail through the castle, down to the Shrine of Amana, a flooded passage where beings known as the Milfanito sing eternally to calm and comfort the local undead. And beyond the shrine lies the undead crypt. This tomb, dutifully guarded by Agdane and his grave wardens, offers a home for the undying, a place of reverence where the undead can find rest in the closest simulation of death and burial that they'll ever know. And it is here, in a private chamber guarded dutifully by his most trusted knight, that we at last find the king. A hollow, mindless, withered, aimlessly wandering his tomb. Despite all his incredible strength and countless sacrifices, the curse spares no one. Amidst his discarded armor, we find the King's Ring, which the Emerald Herald says will gain us passage through the King's locked gates scattered across DRANGLEIC. With this ring in our possession, and with NASHANDRA, the Herald, and the Stranger urging us onward, we head east to the far outskirts of DRANGLEIC, and through a King's Gate to gain entry to the mysterious ALDIA's keep. ALDIA, who once helped his brother Vendrick build DRANGLEIC and tapped into the mysteries of the soul, was eventually banished to this manor. We find evidence of all manner of gruesome experiments and creations inside, but no sign of the man himself. Beyond ALDIA's manor, high above, we stumble into the Dragon Eyrie, a hive of swarming drakes. The Herald greets us again and urges us to speak to the ancient dragon, a being who has watched over the world for eons past. We enter the grand structure beyond the Eyrie, the Dragon Shrine, and at its top, we encounter what appears to be an ancient dragon, a demigod from the age of ancients before time. It greets us and grants us the Ashen Mist Heart, a relic which will allow us to delve into the memories of the lost. NASHANDRA cautions us, the dragon is a prop, a false deity. Don't be fooled. She urges us to take the Ashen Mist Heart back to the fort in the forest, to the remains of the fallen giants that rest there. The King's Ring opens the way to new paths in the fort, and with the Ashen Mist Heart in hand, we are able to venture into the memories of the withered giant bodies we find. In those memories, we see war, the giants' assault on DRANGLEIC, and their battle to take this fort. In one particular memory, we fight our way through the battle to find the giant's king, who looks a little bit familiar. By defeating him, we gain a sort of resonance with the giants' kinship. This would also explain the murderous rage that same giant's going to fly into when he sees us again, many years later. But the Ashen Mist Heart has far more to reveal to us than just the memories of some fallen giant warriors. Used on VENDRICK'S armor in the Undead Crypt, it grants us entry to the memory of the king, and the ability to speak with VENDRICK himself in all his former glory. Seeker of Fire, he calls us. VENDRICK laments his own blindness and failures. He urges us to seek the crowns of lords long past, to claim their strength if we wish to pursue the throne and find our own answers.
Seek adversity, as befits you, Seeker of Fire, coveter of the throne.
This new quest for the crowns takes us to faraway lands and even more adventures. To Shulva, a ruined sanctum once constructed to house and honor the sleeping dragon Sin. To Broom Tower, the old Iron King's defunct iron production facility, now coated in a mysterious ash. And finally to Elaam Lois, a kingdom built to contain the old chaos of Izalith, now frozen in ice and time. Through great adversity, we are eventually victorious, and return to VENDRICK bearing the crowns. But there is one crown left to obtain, VENDRICK'S. We put the hollowed VENDRICK out of his misery, but his crown and his soul aren't on his body, or even in the crypt. We find those locked away and guarded out in the Shrine of Amana. Why would they be hidden all the way out here, we wonder? With the 4 crowns gathered and their power brought together, VENDRICK is able to infuse the crowns with a resistance to the curse, and grants us his blessing to seek the throne, to be the next true monarch of this land.
Inherit fire and harness the dark. Such is the calling of a true leader. Seek strength. The rest will follow.
With that, we make for the final King's Gate deep inside DRANGLEIC Castle, the door to the Throne of Want. Behind that door, we find the Emerald Herald waiting. She bids us farewell and finally reveals her name, Shanalot. She warns us that if we proceed further, NASHANDRA will come after us.
She covets the first flame and the great soul. Put NASHANDRA to rest.
We venture forth, defeat the throne's defenders, and are indeed confronted by NASHANDRA in her true form, a being of pure dark. Her very presence accelerates our hollowing, but we are able to hold our ground and overcome her. But she's not the only being here to confront us. With another great explosion, we are accosted by the stranger once more, now revealed to be ALDIA himself. He's questioned us numerous times on our journey, always with abstract musings.
What drives you so to overcome this supposed curse? Do you still desire peace? Young Hollow, are you intent on shattering the yoke, spoiling this wonderful falsehood?
Now, after so many questions, he demands an answer.
Many monarchs have come and gone. Not one of them stood here as you do now. Give us your answer.
We survive his final test of our resolve and are left to make our decision. As inheritor of the fire and heir to the throne, what do we want, truly? Light? Dark? Or something else entirely? Ultimately, we decide to claim the throne and our place as the true monarch of this land, the inheritor of fire. What lies ahead, only we can see. This does leave us with a lot of unanswered questions, of course, especially as one completing the game for the first time. What did all of those events there at the end mean? What was ALDIA ever talking about? And what's so important about the throne or being the monarch? Actually, that's a good place to start. Much like the kiln of the first flame, the place where Lord Gwyn rekindled the flame in a desperate attempt to preserve his Age of Fire, the Throne of Want is the place where the chosen undead may kindle the first flame in DRANGLEIC. In fact, if you look at the throne room, the room is itself a kiln. And much like the kiln in Dark Souls, to take this throne and inherit the fire represents a choice. You can rekindle the flame, sacrificing yourself to restore the fire, end the curse, and remake the world as you see fit. Or you can refuse to kindle the flame, allowing it to fade, allowing the dark to take hold. Vendrick, when faced with the choice, had not taken the throne, and we eventually filled that role ourselves, becoming the true monarch of DRANGLEIC. But there was another character who desired that seat. Let's talk about NASHANDRA. You will recall NASHANDRA's story from earlier, how she arrived from a faraway land and warned Vendrick of the giant threat, and how he named her his queen. But her true story starts long before that. NASHANDRA's story starts right here. Manus, the father of the Abyss, a being of humanity run wild, fueled the spread of the Abyss under the kingdom of ULACIEL, until the chosen undead, ELISA, put an end to him. Manus's defeat dispersed the Abyss, and shattered his essence into countless fragments that spread across the world. Slowly, over time, those fragments recollected, and took human shapes once more, reborn as children of dark, each with a hunger for power. A yearning for strong souls. The first, smallest, most fragile of those fragments was NASHANDRA. From Manus and the Dark Soul, NASHANDRA inherited the human drive of desire, of want, an insatiable lust for strength, and there could be no better place to gain that strength, to nourish her restored being, than at the side of a would-be monarch with a great soul. Vendrick would be her pawn. She journeyed to DRANGLEIC, where Vendrick was founding his new kingdom, and aided his ascent as the inheritor of fire, slowly building her own power, quietly spreading the dark over the land, biding her time until Vendrick fulfilled his destiny and took the throne, and when that time came, she would swoop in and claim his great soul and the throne for herself. For what greater power could there be than that of the true monarch, seated on the throne of want, the world's fate in her hands? The plan was working, until the day Vendrick learned her secret. It's hard to know exactly when Vendrick realized NASHANDRA's true intentions. He and ALDIA had delved deep into the mysteries of the soul in their search for some way to prevent the undead curse, and the insight he gained is likely what gave NASHANDRA away. Her presence had always brought him calm. In fact, it had brought a sedate peace to his entire kingdom after the war, a peace so deep that it was like the dark. Vendrick had peered deep into the essence of the soul, and when he peered into NASHANDRA, he saw her true nature, the dark of the abyss which swarmed beneath the surface. Sensing her intent, he recognized his own dire situation. Attempting to take the throne himself would be playing right into her hands, and all his other efforts to fight the spread of the curse had already failed. With no options left to him, Vendrick hatched a plan. He would not take the throne, and he would see to it that she couldn't either. Two things were required to take one's place on the throne of want and inherit the fire: the giant's kinship to gain entrance to the throne room, and a great soul powerful enough to kindle the flame. Vendrick had to be sure that NASHANDRA could obtain neither. Access to the giant's kinship could only be gained by battling the giants and the giant lord, an impossible task without the power of the Ashen Mist Heart. She would have to convince the ancient dragon to grant her that, and without Vendrick's king's ring, she wouldn't even be able to pass through the gates blocking the way to the dragon shrine or the giant's withered remains. The giant's kinship was out of reach, and that just left his great soul. So Vendrick went into exile. With the king's ring safely on his person and his most loyal knights in tow, he fled through the king's passage, leaving the looking-glass knight behind to guard the entrance. In the Shrine of Amana, Vendrick locked both his great soul and his crown away behind a secret door under the guard of one of his dragon riders. The door would only open to a being in human form, and even then, only after Vendrick himself was defeated. Now separate from his great soul and hollowing rapidly, Vendrick retreated to the undead crypt, where, under the eternal vigil of his right-hand knight, he would accept his fate, withering away to a husk and wandering his chamber for eternity. NASHANDRA was furious. Thwarted in her initial efforts, she had no choice but to await a new pawn, one who she could send after Vendrick, one who could withstand his gauntlet and open the way to the throne. So, when we arrive at her doorstep, with great souls gathered and the intent to find Vendrick, she found in us her new pawn. But that hubris would be her undoing. By pushing us through Vendrick's gauntlet, she made us stronger. So when the time came to follow us into the opened throne room and take our soul by force, ELISA proved the stronger. NASHANDRA was stopped. NASHANDRA was not the only fragment of Manus we bumped into, though. In fact, over the span of our long journey to the throne, we encountered at least 4 of these Sisters of Dark. And their stories are pretty interesting, so let's take a moment to talk about the stories behind those old crowns we gathered. Our first quest took us underground to Shulva, the Sanctum City, built by the mysterious and powerful Sunken King to house and protect a great slumbering dragon. The king spared no expense building and defending this shrine, for it was really more a temple than a cage. Although the dragon would doubtless destroy his entire kingdom if it were ever to wake, the king and his people felt great reverence for the magnificent beast. Royal priestesses even sang to it to ease its slumber. Little is known of the Sunken King himself, but he was said to entertain many a troubadour and traveler in his court. And he must have been a powerful king because, like Vendrick, he one day found a mysterious woman at his door, Ilana, another child of Dark, formed from the broken fragments of Manus and the Abyss. She was born with the same drive to acquire strength, but where NASHANDRA was Manus's want and greed given human form, Ilana had inherited Manus's wrath and fury. She gained the Sunken King's trust and grew her power alongside his. But whatever plans she had for Shulva were soon interrupted. A rival order of knights, the Drakebloods, led by Sir Jorg, sought to invade Sanctum City. These knights worshipped dragons as well, specifically dragon blood, believing it to be the key to transcendence. One day, despite the Sunken King's best efforts at defense, the Drakebloods broke through. Sir Jorg killed the Sunken King that day, fought his way through the Sanctum City, and entered the dwelling of Sin, the slumbering dragon. With a single strike, he drove his spear through the dragon's back. The dragon snapped awake and spewed forth a poisonous fog so thick that it quickly shrouded the entire city. When the cloud of death finally cleared, Shulva was quiet, nearly all of its inhabitants exterminated. But Ilana remained, tainted by the toxin but very much alive, and her fury burned all the brighter. When we arrive in the remains of Shulva, who knows how many centuries later, we find a city inhabited only by hollows, picked clean by scavengers. And in the eternal sanctum, past all the traps and lingering defenders, we find Ilana, the squalid queen, singing to the dragon just as the priestesses once had, amassing souls in anticipation of her day of vengeance. There is some speculation that it's actually her song which slowly fills the dragon with poison, so that it might one day be unleashed on her enemies. Whoever those enemies are and whatever vengeance she planned, we put a stop to it by defeating both her and Sin to claim the crown of the Sunken King. Our second quest took us to Broom Tower, the iron production facility once owned by the Old Iron King. This monarch had started out insignificant, a little-known lord with few resources and little power to pursue his greater ambitions. Then one day, an unusual warrior arrived from the east, and for some reason this strange knight, named Sir Alan, decided to serve this obscure, unestablished lord, and his service would kickstart the little lord's ascent to power. Alan trained the Lord's knights in his own foreign fighting techniques and led their armies to victory over their enemies, at the expense of nearly all of the Lord's precious few resources. But his luck was about to change with the discovery of the Scorching Iron Scepter, a tool which enabled him to produce a nearly endless supply of iron. His tower became an iron production facility, and he gained a new moniker, the Iron King. With so much iron at his disposal, the Iron King became an unstoppable force. But this ascent to great power also revealed his true character, the vanity and the conceit fueling his ambitions. His was a rule of hedonistic decadence, of extravagant displays of power. He constructed an enormous iron keep, and even found ways to infuse his iron creations with souls, granting life to armies of automaton knights and iron chariots. It's even said that he attempted to create an iron dragon once. The king's power was unchallenged, untouchable, but inevitably, the curse reared its head once more. One by one, his subjects fell victim to the dark sign as the curse swept across his kingdom. But unlike Vendrick, the Iron King had no interest in understanding the curse's cause. To him, it was merely another challenger who dared defy his rightful rule. He ordered his soldiers to round up any cursed subjects they could find. He often led the royal undead hunts himself for sport, leading his men through the huntsman's copse in search of any cursed undead hiding there, locking them in cages or sending them to the undead purgatory, where his executioner's chariot would torment them for eternity, running them down again and again until they hollowed. The king sought no cure, aiming only to exterminate anybody carrying the mark, never realizing the futility of his short-sighted efforts. It was said that Sir Alan, after witnessing this descent into depravity, decided to abandon his lord and depart for lands unknown. Or perhaps Alan was killed by a mysterious invader. Whatever the cause, the Iron King was crushed by the loss of his loyal knight. Turning to Magus Aegil, a loyal mage in his service, the king pursued his automaton experiments with renewed fervor, hoping to create a golem with a will of its own, a successor to his lost compatriot, a servant worthy of the Iron King's incomparable power. He and Aegil attempted to infuse fire itself with souls, with will, and gave life to the smelter demon. But the golem turned on its master, and the king was incinerated. Details about the king's fate are foggy beyond this point. What is known is that the king's body sank into the earth, into the lava below, and met another mysterious soul there. This ancient, powerful soul took hold of the Iron King's remains and formed a great demon. The Iron King was gone, his kingdom finished. So when a child of dark arrived one day at the Iron King's tower, she was already too late. Nadalia, a manifestation of Manus's loneliness, wandered the halls searching for the Iron King, but found no one. And when she eventually found the king's throne and crown abandoned in the tower's lowest reaches, she fell into despair. She claimed his tower as her own, abandoning her physical form and transfiguring into a thick smoke and ash which covered the entire tower. She possessed the husks of the tower's original occupants and fought off any intruders who would dare encroach on her solitude. The place became known as Broom Tower. Perhaps she hoped that someday another worthy monarch would enter the tower, or perhaps she simply wished to be left alone. Whatever the case, we survive the dangers of her tower and find the crown of the old Iron King in the hands of her ashen remains. Our third quest took us to the frozen kingdom of Alium Lois, built by the Ivory King. The Ivory King was a ruler beloved by his people, known for both his bravery and mercy, and his rule would be defined by a singular conflict, his lifelong struggle to contain the spread of the old chaos, that ancient threat born from the Witch of Izalith's futile attempt to recreate the First Flame so long ago. With his magnificent soul, the Ivory King built Alium Lois atop the raging chaos flame, built great walls to contain it, established an order of priestesses to subdue it. He constructed a grand cathedral and built his throne room directly over the mouth of the old chaos. Every day, he would serve as the first line of defense. It was inevitable that a king so powerful would gain the attention of a child of dark, Alsana. A fragment of the abyss, this one inheriting Manus's fear, arrived at the Ivory King's door. The king offered his protection and employed her as a retainer, and they grew very fond of each other over time. But as a being born of the Abyss, Alsana's presence inevitably spread the dark over Alium Lois, and the king eventually felt his soul begin to degrade. Realizing his situation, the king made a decision. He would leave Alium Lois in Alsana's care. He gave her a gift, a sword named after his magnificent city, made with 2 intertwined blades, one light, one dark, symbolizing their love. He gave one of his loyal pets the task of protecting the realm's new queen. Then, without a word, the Ivory King gathered his faithful knights for a desperate assault, one final attempt to subdue the chaos below. Only a handful of those knights made it back out. Alsana waited a long time for her king's return, but without the king and his knights to contain it, the chaos began to grow in power, spawning atrocities in the city, and the people were eventually forced to flee. Alsana was left alone to watch over Alium Lois, to honor the king's wishes by containing the chaos, to warn away anybody who wanders into the city, and to wait with the faint hope that the king would someday return to her. We arrive countless years later to find the city frozen over. Alsana speaks to us, warning us of the threat contained within the city walls. When we reach the king's grand cathedral, Alsana begs us to help her, to plunge into the chaos ourselves, find the Ivory King, and free him from his prison. We gather what few royal knights remain, dive into the heart of chaos, and find what remains of the king and his assault party. They've been consumed by the chaos, charred, their souls burning in agony. We can do nothing to stop the raging chaos itself, but we do put the king and his warriors to rest, claiming his crown in the process. Alsana is grateful and wishes us well as we leave to finish our own journey. It seems that she intends to remain, to continue holding the chaos at bay, as her dear king would have wished. As you can see, Dark Souls 2 is a game full of characters and side stories, and though there are way too many of them to really get into here, I think a few more of them deserve some special mention. We first encountered LUCATIEL in the Lost Bastille, a fellow wanderer in the land of DRANGLEIC. She hails from MIRRAH, a land which places great value in martial strength. She and her brother Aslatiel had risen from nothing to become respected knights, distinguishing themselves on the battlefield, maintaining a healthy rivalry with each other. But one day, Aslatiel disappeared without a word, and wasn't heard from in MIRRAH again. Then, not long after, to her horror, LUCATIEL found the mark of the curse on her skin. She had heard legends of DRANGLEIC, a land where powerful souls can reverse the degenerative effects of hollowing. In desperation, she left MIRRAH and journeyed here to search for a cure, and perhaps even to find her brother. We encounter her numerous times on our journey, even fight alongside her a few times, but each meeting sees her in an increasingly hollowed state, her thoughts growing more hazy, her memories fading. She is terrified of losing her mind, of losing herself to this curse and going hollow, but there's nothing she can do to stop it. By the time we encounter her outside ALDIA's keep, she's barely keeping it together, and struggles to even recall our face. We never see her again after that meeting. Inside the keep, however, we are suddenly accosted by someone else, someone wearing a very similar garb, Aslatiel. Who knows if LUCATIEL ever actually found him, or where she wandered after. We can only hope that with the fire rekindled and the curse eradicated, she will find peace. VELSTADT and RAIME were once VENDRICK'S right and left hands, his most trusted knights and the commanders of his forces. But one day the two quarreled. RAIME was declared a traitor and left the king's service, going into exile. The royal aegis VELSTADT remained at his post, however, dutifully serving the king until his final days and beyond. When VENDRICK fled DRANGLEIC Castle, VELSTADT was close at his side, and when the king took up permanent residence in the undead crypt, ordering his royal aegis to kill any intruder who attempted to follow, VELSTADT obeyed, quietly watching over his hollowing liege for eternity. As for RAIME, in his exile, he wandered the world in search of greater strength and purpose, a new lord to serve. One day, he came upon a tower, covered in smoke and ash, and in that tower, he encountered Nadalia. He could have cleansed that haunted tower of her presence that day, but he was fascinated by her. He chose instead to accompany her, making Broom Tower his home. Nadalia made RAIME her champion, imbuing him with the power of dark, empowering his body and weapons with her own soul. He was reborn as the Fume Knight. So, okay, let's just jump to the obvious question. What is Ornstein doing here? He is the only character from Dark Souls 1 to seemingly make a repeat appearance. Now, information is really limited, and the most likely answer is that there really is no answer to be found. Maybe FromSoft just threw him in there for fun. But I say, why just write things off when you could be having fun speculating? Now, there are numerous possibilities here. Some theorize that the old Dragonslayer might be a reincarnation of Ornstein's soul, which sort of works. Many of Lordran's great souls do seem to currently be in the possession of beings here in DRANGLEIC, and you may recall that Ornstein was granted a piece of Gwen's soul, which may be reincarnating as well. Others theorize that this isn't Ornstein at all, but here's the theory that I find most interesting at least. The old Dragonslayer is Ornstein, but the one we fought in Anor Londo wasn't. When the curse spread in Lordran and the fire began to fade, many of Gwen's allies began to abandon Anor Londo, including Gwen's own daughter. Guinevere fled Lordran together with the flame god Flann, never to be heard from again. And we also know that they were later married. Now, let's suppose, just for a moment, that these two gods established a kingdom of their own, a place likely similar in architectural style to the Anor Londo they had known. Now, I'm not saying that the nation of Hyde was definitely built by a princess of fire and a flame god, but you gotta admit the cities do look pretty similar, and one of Hyde's most prominent structures is a tower of flame. It's not impossible. So just assuming that, what if Ornstein went with them? What if the old Dragonslayer we find guarding the Cathedral of Blue is the real Ornstein? And if that's true, who did we fight in Anor Londo? Well, we already know that much of the Anor Londo we experienced was an illusion fabricated by Gwendolyn. Guinevere, most of the knights guarding the city, even the sun itself was an elaborate ruse. What if Ornstein and Smo were a part of that illusion as well? Consider it, they're a pretty unlikely pair to begin with, which is a point I brought up in the first lore video. And it seems so unlikely that neither of them would ever realize that they were guarding an illusion in all that time. What if the Ornstein and the Smo we fought in Anor Londo were part of Gwendolyn's illusion, false guards to defend a false princess? And here's the thing, if that was the case, Gwendolyn could present them in their peak idealized form, two of Anor Londo's finest at the height of their strength, a fantasy dream team that almost no real warrior could hope to withstand. Ornstein and Smo as legends would remember them. Compare that to the old Dragonslayer we do face. A powerful foe, but a shadow of the threat we faced in Anor Londo. Not half as threatening, diminished, and alone. It is an extremely unlikely theory. There's as much evidence against it as there is for it, but come on, that's pretty fun to think about. Now, I could keep going for hours and hours telling the side stories of this world. The story of the baneful queen, wed to a king whose love she could never truly win, no matter how hard she tried. The story of the belfries Luna and Sol, erected long ago by a princess and a prince from rival kingdoms who could never be together. The mystery of the Pursuers, a strange order of ancient knights who eternally hunt the cursed as some sort of atonement for their own sins. The story of Benhart, a warrior from a far-off land trying to unlock the dormant power of his family's treasured sword, unaware that the blade he so proudly wields is a fake. The tale of Strayed, a powerful mage from a time long past, locked in the Bastille, trapped, and turned to stone by people who feared him. Or the tale of the scoundrels Pate and Crichton, two opportunists double-crossing each other all up and down DRANGLEIC. Dark Souls 2 is packed with little short stories like these. Unfortunately, there isn't ultimately a whole lot to most of them. Many of these narrative tangents don't really go anywhere. They have little relevance to our journey, and they tend to lack sufficient connective tissue to form a complete story without heaps of supposition and guesswork to tie things together. Besides, if I covered even half of them, I would be here all day. And there is one more story that I want to dive into here, because it might be the most important one of all. ALDIA, you may recall, was VENDRICK'S older brother, who helped to build the kingdom of DRANGLEIC and aided the king in his exploration into the mysteries of the soul. Vendrick always feared the return of the curse, the blight that had risen to topple so many kingdoms before his. He sought to understand the true nature of the curse so that he might prevent its resurgence, and ALDIA aided him in this quest. The king's brother became obsessed with his studies, performing experiments of all kinds, but his methods did not sit well with Vendrick. Although they shared the same goal, the fervor of their individual pursuits pulled them in different directions and weakened their family ties. Eventually, Vendrick shunned his brother entirely, banished him to his keep. But ALDIA did not abandon his work. The question had taken hold of him. He secluded himself in his manor, conducting all manner of horrendous experiments. He dissected and studied the prisoners of war Vendrick brought back from his campaign against the Giants. He attempted to recreate the ancient dragons. He even attempted to breed a human-dragon hybrid. Anyone who dared visit ALDIA's keep vanished, and countless monsters and abominations poured from ALDIA's halls as he studied and experimented upon the undead tirelessly. ALDIA sought to understand the undead curse, to find some way to shed the yoke of fate. Why does the undead curse happen? Why does rekindling the flame with a powerful soul put a stop to it? And why does it keep coming back, no matter how many times the flame is kindled? By the time we arrive in DRANGLEIC, ALDIA is no longer human, an abomination of chaos, no doubt resulting from some mad experiment gone wrong. But he has found some of the answers he sought. Back in the time of Lordran, when the first flame began to fade and the undead curse first spread, threatening to end the Age of Fire, Lord Gwyn was afraid. He feared the coming Age of Dark, the rise of man, the decline of his own power. In his desperation, he fed his own soul to the flame, sacrificing himself to rekindle it and extend his Age of Fire, defying nature itself. With this act, Gwyn disrupted the natural order and created a cycle, a perpetual struggle between light and dark. When the flame is kindled, the fire burns bright again, dispelling the curse for a time. But that fire will eventually fade. When that fire goes out, the dark will thrive. But a dull ember will always remain in the ashes, just waiting for a powerful soul to kindle the fire anew. That choice we made in Dark Souls 1, to kindle the flame or let it die, it ultimately never mattered which we chose, because the result is the same. The world is a skipping record, and we are doomed to repeat this cycle forever. ALDIA regards Gwyn's actions as the first sin, the act that broke the natural order of the world and doomed us all to this cycle. The Age of Dark was to be our time, the Age of Man, and Gwyn robbed us of it. Sure, the Age of Fire has its beauty and its comforts, and we have spent countless millennia fighting to preserve it, desperately clinging to the humanity and the fleshy forms the fire grants us. But this is not our true state. The humanity that fills our empty vessels is but a byproduct of the flame. We were empty vessels before the fire, and we will be vessels again when the fire is gone. The undead curse is merely man returning to their natural state. And yes, that is frightening, but as ALDIA argues, what if our true destiny lies beyond? We've never really seen a proper Age of Dark, one where the Age of Fire had truly permanently ended. What might await us there? And what might await us in the ages after? What if our true glory was still to come? ALDIA insists that instead of fighting so hard to eternally cling to this lie that is humanity and prolonging the cycle that Gwyn condemned us to for his own gains, let's break this cycle and discover our true destiny, the one Gwyn stole from us. If you acquire all of the crowns and bring them to Vendrick before finishing the game, Vendrick will bless the crowns with the power to stop hollowing, protection from the effects of the curse. If you approach the Throne of Want with this power, ALDIA offers you a third choice. Kindle the fire, don't kindle the fire, those choices are ultimately the same. ALDIA proposes a new solution. Refuse to inherit the order of this world. As an undead with immunity to hollowing, as an inheritor of the fire who can exist outside the cycle and can't be broken by the curse, we can choose to reject light and dark and journey back out into the world to forge a path of our own, seeking a new answer. Beyond the scope of light, beyond the reach of dark, what could possibly await us? I gotta say, I actually really enjoy the lore of Dark Souls 2. It may be scattered and disjointed, and there may not be quite enough connective tissue between the information they do give us, but what can be pieced together is really fascinating to me. Even if little to none of this carries over into the lore of Dark Souls 3, I am very, very glad I played this one, and I absolutely recommend it to any of you who might have decided to skip it. Also, if you want to dig a little further into some of this lore, or learn more about any of the characters or side stories I skipped, check out all of those lore links in the description, because there's a lot to see. I want to thank all of you for joining me again on this second side quest. It was a lengthy journey, but a rewarding one, and I cannot wait to start digging into the final chapter of this trilogy. I hope you've been enjoying Dan Jones's Bloodborne series in the meantime. I can't say exactly when Side Quest Season 3 will start, but it is absolutely happening, and I hope you'll all join me when the time comes. Until then,